Hello, I'm Nadine, and I am going to be leading your bass clarinet warm-up today. So we are going to start on a sheet that's called Chop Busters. We're going to start with number 7. And number 7 can get a little bit tricky, going back and forth between C and B flat, A flat, and G, just because there's so many fingers that we're putting down all at once. But if you keep all of your bottom fingers down throughout this exercise, it'll make it a lot easier for you. So I will count us off, and we'll start with that one. 1, 2, 3. So for that one, just take breaths wherever you need to, and if you need to give that one a few more tries, maybe you squeaked or something, totally normal, happens all the time. Just pause the video and give that another couple tries with me. So we are going to move on to number 1. And number 1 on bass clarinet can be a little bit tough because we're going back and forth over the break again, but that is something that we need to be really, really good at being able to do, especially on bass clarinet. It requires a lot of air, so this is a really, really good warm-up to get your air started for the day. So play that with me. I'll count us off. We're going to go kind of slowly. 1, 2, 3. So that one's kind of a finger twister, but if you can slur the whole thing, that is absolutely what you should do. So it's written as slurred, so you're supposed to slur it, but if you're like squeaking a lot and it's really, really hard, practice this one by articulating it and then start slurring it, because when you're slurring it, you really catch all the little blips between notes where you might not be playing exactly the right fingering at the right time. So if you need to work up to slurring it, that's okay. But I strongly encourage you all to slur this one. This one is so, so good for you. Just practicing going over the break really with every combination of notes you might encounter. So we're going to move on to exercise 4, which is a chromatic scale. If you need to refresh on any of the alternate fingerings that you need to use in this scale, go right ahead. I'm going to play the top line with you on the first line, and then the second line, it's just triplets in the 1 octave. So I'll count us off for that, and we'll play that one together. 1, 2, 3. Awesome job. That one, if you're doing it without me, if you're just doing it by yourself, I strongly encourage you to put on a metronome, because when you switch to triplets from eighth notes, if you're not really, really good at keeping a steady pulse internally, they rush. The tendency is to rush. And there's no shame in it. That's why we use a metronome, and that's why we play in a band. So we have to be held honest to our own internal tempo. But put on a metronome for that one if you're doing it without me. And now we are going to move on to number 8. So this one is the bass clarinet part to a chorale that you would probably play in band with all of the other parts happening on top. So it might sound a little bit weird, but it has some really, really good technical things in it that we need to be working on, like long tones and consistency of like pitch in a long tone, because sometimes if you're holding out a note forever, it starts to like wobble a little bit. So it's really, really good practice for all of us to just practice holding out notes like that. So I will count us off for exercise 8 and really pay attention to the dynamics, and we will play together. 1, 2, 3. Great. So I know that one might sound a little weird without all the other parts on it, but I encourage you to practice it just to get working on those long tones, especially if you can't hold a note that long on bass clarinet. I know it requires a lot of air, but if you take a big old diaphragm breath, you will make it to the end of that note, I promise. You have bigger lungs than you think you do. All of us do. So really, really try and make it through that whole F, that 3-measure F. You can do it in one breath. I promise you can. So that's all I have for today for our warm-ups. I will see you next week for another set.